It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in Oakwood Hills. This was a small, quiet neighborhood where everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least that's what they thought. The houses sat close together with neat little yards and clean sidewalks. Kids rode bikes, dogs barked, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass. It was the kind of place where nothing big ever happened, or so it seemed. Then there was Jake Miller. Jake was a regular guy, not too loud, not too fancy. He had just moved into a little house on Elm Street right at the edge of Oakwood Hills. He was the new kid on the block and he liked to keep things simple. Jake had short brown hair, a friendly smile, and a pair of old sneakers he wore everywhere. He wasn't the type to make a fuss or show off. All he wanted was a quiet spot to call home. One day, Jake decided to build something in his backyard. It was a shed, a small one, nothing special. He made it out of wood he bought at the store, hammering nails and sawing boards all by himself. The shed wasn't big or shiny. It was just a plain little box with a door, a place to keep his tools like his hammer, his screwdriver, and his rusty old lawnmower. Jake liked working with his hands. It made him happy to fix things and build stuff. He even painted the shed door bright red just for fun. It looked cool against the green grass and the brown wood. But someone didn't like that shed, not one bit. That someone was Karen Baxter. Karen lived 2 houses down from Jake, and she wasn't like most people in Oakwood Hills. Karen was the boss of the HOA. That stands for Homeowners Association, a group that makes rules about how houses and yards should look. Karen loved those rules more than anything. She carried a clipboard everywhere, writing down notes about people's grass or fences. She had sharp eyes and a loud voice, and when she stared at you, it felt like a grizzly bear was growling in your face. Nobody messed with Karen, or at least they tried not to. From the very first day Jake moved in, Karen had her eyes on him. She watched him from her front porch, peeking over her coffee cup. She saw him unload boxes from his truck, and she saw him wave hello to the neighbors. She didn't wave back. Karen didn't trust new people. She liked things to stay the same, and Jake was different. He didn't know all her rules yet, and that made her twitchy. She'd march up and down the street in her bright yellow sneakers, telling people what to do. Cut your bushes. She'd yell at Mr. Thompson, no bikes on the grass. She'd snap at little Timmy. Most folks just nodded and let her talk. They didn't want trouble, but Jake, he was different. See, Jake wasn't the kind of guy who scared easy. He didn't mind Karen's glares or her loud voice. When she stared at him, he'd just smile and keep doing his thing. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't going to let anyone push him around either. And that's where the trouble started. Karen didn't know it yet, but she was about to pick a fight with the wrong person. Jake had a secret, a big one. It wasn't something he talked about, but it was something that made him special. Karen had no clue who she was messing with, and that was going to make this story wild. Let's rewind a bit. That sunny Saturday morning, Jake was out in his yard working on his shed. The sun was warm, the birds were chirping, and everything felt peaceful. He had his toolbox open and he was whistling a little tune. The red door on his shed was almost done. He just needed to add a few more nails. He stepped back to look at it, wiping sweat off his forehead. Not bad, he said to himself, grinning. He liked how it turned out. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. Across the street, Karen was watching. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, her clipboard tucked under one elbow. Her house was perfect, white paint, green shutters, not a weed in sight. She liked it that way. But when she saw Jake's shed, her nose wrinkled up like she smelled something bad. That red door stuck out like a sore thumb. It didn't match the other houses. It didn't fit her rules. And Karen hated things that didn't fit. She marched over to her mailbox, pretending to check it, but really she was staring at Jake. She mumbled to herself, "Who does he think he is? That shed's too close to the fence, and that color, She flipped open her clipboard and started writing. She wrote fast, her pen scratching the paper like an angry chicken. Jake didn't notice. He was too busy hammering. But Karen was already making plans. She wasn't going to let this go. Now, Oakwood Hills wasn't a big place. There were maybe 20 houses, all lined up in a neat row. Everyone knew Karen because she made sure they did. She'd been the HOA boss for years, and she loved telling people what to do. If your grass got too long, Karen knocked on your door. If your trash can stayed out past Tuesday, Karen left a note. Most people just sighed and followed her rules. It was easier that way, but Jake wasn't most people. Jake had moved to Oakwood Hills because he wanted a fresh start. He'd lived in a big city before, full of noise and crowds. He didn't talk about it much, but he'd done some pretty cool stuff there, stuff that made him smart and tough. He picked this little neighborhood because it looked calm and friendly. He didn't know about Karen yet. He didn't know she'd turn his quiet life into a big mess, but he was about to find out. That morning, as Jake worked on his shed, the neighbors were out too. Old Mr. Thompson was watering his flowers. Little Timmy was riding his bike in circles. Mrs. Lopez was sweeping her porch. They all saw Jake's shed and they didn't mind it. "Looks nice," Mrs. Lopez called over, giving him a thumbs up. "Thanks," Jake called back, waving. He liked these people. They seemed nice. But Karen, she wasn't nice. Karen finished writing on her clipboard and marched back inside. She slammed her door so hard the windows rattled. Jake heard it, but he didn't look up. He just kept working. He didn't know Karen was already plotting. She didn't like his shed and she didn't like him. To her, Jake was trouble, a new guy who didn't follow her rule. That was a problem, and Karen loved fixing problems her way. Here's the thing, Jake wasn't just some guy with a shed. He had a past, a story Karen didn't know. Back in the city, he'd worked a job that taught him all about rules and laws. He knew how to spot trouble and how to fix it. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't brag, but he was ready. Karen thought she was the boss of everything, but Jake wasn't going to let her walk all over him, and that's what made this so exciting. So picture this, a sunny day, a little shed with a red door and a grumpy lady with a clipboard. It sounds simple, right? But it's not. This story's got twists and turns you won't see coming. Karen thought she could scare Jake, but she didn't know the truth. She didn't know the cops would end up at her door, not his. How that going to happen? You'll have to stick around to find out. Before we go on, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? Are you in a big city or a small town like Oakwood Hills? And have you ever had a neighbor like Karen, someone who thinks they're in charge of everything? Drop your answers in the comments below. Oh, and if you like stories like this, where the little guy wins, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Jake didn't know it yet, but that red door was about to start a war. Karen was ready to fight, but she had no idea who Jake really was. She thought he was just a new guy with a silly shed. She was wrong, and soon everyone in Oakwood Hills would see it. This was just the beginning, a sunny day that was about to get stormy. Ready for more? Let's keep going. It all started with the shed door. Jake had painted it bright red just because he thought it looked fun. He liked how it stood out in his backyard like a little splash of color against the green grass and the plain brown wood of the shed. To Jake, it was no big deal, just something to make his yard feel like his own. But to Karen Baxter, that red door was like a giant problem. She didn't see it as fun. She saw it as a crime. One afternoon, the sun was still high in the sky and Jake was outside working. He had his hammer in one hand and a nail in the other, tapping away at the shed. He was happy, whistling a little song, enjoying the warm air. That's when Karen came marching over. She didn't walk slow or quiet like most people. No, she stormed across the street like a tornado, her yellow sneakers slapping the pavement. In her hand, she held her phone, already snapping pictures of Jake's shed like she was a detective on a big case. Her other hand clutched her HOA handbook, a little book full of rules she loved more than anything. "This is against Regulation 7B, she screeched, her voice so loud it made Jake's ears hurt. She waved the handbook in the air like it was a magic wand. "That red door is an eyesore. I'm calling the board about this." Her face was all scrunched up and her eyes were narrow, glaring at Jake like he'd done something terrible. To her, that red door wasn't just paint, it was a slap in the face to all her rules. Jake didn't even look up at first. He just kept hammering, tapping the nail into the wood with a steady bang, bang, bang. Then he stopped, wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, and gave her a little smile. "It's my shed, my yard," he said, calm as could be. His voice was soft, like he didn't have a worry in the world. He wasn't yelling or fighting. He was just telling her how he saw it, simple and clear. But Karen, oh, that made her mad, really mad. Her face turned as red as the shed door, maybe even redder. Her cheeks puffed out and her eyes got so big they looked like they might pop. "You'll regret this, new guy," she huffed, pointing a finger at him like she was casting a spell. Then she spun around and stomped off, her sneakers making loud thumps all the way back to her house. She didn't look back, but Jake could hear her muttering under her breath, something about rules and trouble. Jake watched her go, still holding his hammer. He shrugged his shoulders like it was no big thing. "Okay," he said to himself and went back to work. The hammer started banging again and the shed door stayed red. To anyone else it might have seemed like the fight was over, but deep down Jake knew better. This wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the kind of person who let things go. She didn't just complain, she made things personal. And that's where the real trouble was brewing. See, Karen wasn't like most neighbors. She didn't just say hi or wave over the fence. She was the queen of the HOA and she acted like she owned the whole street. If something wasn't perfect, Karen made it her job to fix it, or at least yell about it until someone else did. She'd been bossing people around for years. Old Mr. Thompson once left his trash can out too long, and Karen banged on his door until he moved it. Little Timmy rode his bike too close to her flowers once and she chased him down the street with her clipboard. Everyone in Oakwood Hills knew Karen's temper. Most of them just nodded and did what she said to keep the peace. But Jake wasn't like that. He didn't scare easy. He didn't care about her clipboard or her rules. To him, that red door was his choice and he wasn't going to change it just because Karen said so. He wasn't mean about it, he didn't yell or fight back. He just kept doing his thing, calm and steady. That's what made Karen so mad. She wasn't used to people ignoring her. And Jake, he ignored her like she was a buzzing fly he could swat away. What Karen didn't know was that Jake had a secret. It wasn't something he told anyone about. He didn't brag or show off. But it was there, hiding behind his friendly smile and his old sneakers. Jake wasn't just some new guy with a shed. He was smart, really smart. Back in the city where he used to live, he'd done a job that taught him all about rules and how to handle people like Karen. He knew how to stay cool when things got hot, and he knew how to turn a fight around when the time was right. Karen had no idea who she was messing with, and that was going to make everything flip upside down. After Karen stomped off, Jake finished his work for the day. He put his tools back in the shed, closed that bright red door, and went inside his house. The neighborhood got quiet again. Birds chirped and the sun started to dip low, turning the sky orange. But across the street, Karen was busy. She sat at her kitchen table, her phone in one hand and her handbook in the other. She was mad, madder than she'd been in a long time. That red door wasn't just a door to her. It was a challenge. And Karen didn't like challenges. She started texting people. She sent messages to the HOA board telling them about Jake's shed. "It's against the rules," she typed, her fingers flying over the screen. "We need a meeting, this can't stand." She called her friend Linda, who lived 3 houses down, and complained for 10 whole minutes. "He thinks he can do whatever he wants," she said, her voice loud enough to wake a sleeping dog. Linda just said, because she didn't want to argue. Karen didn't care. She was on a mission. Back at Jake's house, he was sitting on his couch eating a sandwich. He didn't know about Karen's texts or her phone calls. He didn't hear her plotting, but he wasn't worried. He'd dealt with people like her before. He knew she'd come back, probably with more yelling and more rules. And he was ready, not with shouting or fighting, but with something better, something Karen would never see coming. The next day, Karen was at it again. She walked past Jake's house, slow and sneaky, like a cat hunting a mouse. She took more pictures of the shed, zooming in on that red door. She wrote notes in her handbook, circling Regulation 7B with a big, angry pen. Jake saw her from his window, but he didn't say anything. He just watched, sipping his coffee, a little smile on his face. He wasn't mad. He wasn't scared. He was waiting. Karen thought she had the power. She thought her rules and her clipboard made her the boss. She thought Jake was just some new guy she could boss around, but she was wrong. Every time she yelled, every time she pointed her finger, she was digging herself into a bigger mess. Jake's secret was like a hidden treasure, and soon it was going to come out. When it did, Karen's whole world would turn upside down. The tension was growing, like a rubber band stretching tighter and tighter. Karen kept pushing and Jake kept waiting. The neighbors started to notice too. Mrs. Lopez saw Karen taking pictures and shook her head. "That lady needs to relax," she muttered. Little Timmy rode by on his bike and giggled. "Karen's mad again." Even old Mr. Thompson peeked out his window, wondering what all the fuss was about. Everyone could feel it. Something big was coming. Jake didn't say much, but he knew. He knew Karen wouldn't stop. She'd keep coming back, louder and meaner every time, and he was okay with that, because the more she pushed, the closer she got to her own big surprise. That red door wasn't just a door anymore. It was the start of a fight Karen didn't know she was going to lose. And when she did, it was going to be a moment no one in Oakwood Hills would forget. Days went by after Karen's big yelling fit about the red shed door. The sun kept shining, the birds kept singing, and Oakwood Hills stayed quiet, well, almost quiet. Karen got louder every day. She wasn't happy with Jake, and she made sure everyone knew it. She didn't just stop at yelling. Oh no, she took it up a notch. One morning, Jake stepped outside to get his mail, and there it was, a nasty note stuck right on his porch. It was written in big, angry letters, "Fix that door or else." The "or else" part was underlined 3 times, like Karen wanted to scare him. But Jake, he didn't scare easy. He picked up the note, read it, and just chuckled. He crumpled it into a little ball and tossed it in the trash. Then he went back to his day, acting like nothing happened. The next day there was another note. "That red door breaks the rules. Change it now." Jake smiled again, shook his head, and threw that one away too. Karen was mad, but Jake stayed cool as a cucumber. Karen didn't stop with notes. She got sneakier. One afternoon, she walked around the neighborhood with her clipboard, knocking on doors. She talked to a few neighbors, like Linda and Mr. Thompson, trying to get them on her side. "We need to stop this new guy," she said, her voice sharp. "That shed door is awful. Sign my petition." A petition is like a list where people write their names to agree on something. Karen wanted everyone to agree that Jake's red door had to go. Linda signed it because she didn't want to argue. Mr. Thompson grumbled but signed too. Karen grinned like she'd won a prize. She thought she was winning. Jake saw all this from his yard. He was mowing his lawn, pushing the mower back and forth, making nice straight lines in the grass. When Karen walked by with her petition, he gave her a little wave. "Hi, Karen," he called, friendly as ever. Karen didn't wave back. She just glared and kept walking. Jake's red door was still shining bright, and that made her steam like a teapot ready to whistle. But here, where it gets good, really good, Jake wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. He started noticing things. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't tell anyone. He just watched, quiet and careful, like a fox waiting for the right moment. See, Karen thought her yard was perfect. She always bragged about how neat it was, how she followed every HOA rule. But Jake saw the truth. Karen's yard wasn't so perfect after all. One day, Jake was watering his flowers near the fence. He looked over at Karen's house, just a quick peek. That's when he saw it. Her fence was leaning, not a lot, but enough to notice. The wooden boards were slanted, like they might fall over if the wind blew too hard. Jake tilted his head and thought, that's funny. He didn't say anything out loud. He just kept watering, letting the water sprinkle over his daisies. A few days later, Jake was taking out his trash. He walked past Karen's house and he saw something else. Her grass wasn't all green and smooth like she said. It was patchy. Some spots were brown and dry, like no one had watered it in weeks. Jake scratched his chin and nodded to himself. Interesting, he thought. Still, he didn't say a word. He just walked back home, humming a little tune. Then came the big one, the real surprise. One evening, Jake was out in his backyard fixing a loose board on his shed. The sun was going down, painting the sky pink and orange. He happened to look over at Karen's garage. It was tucked behind her house, hidden from the street. Most people never saw it, but Jake did. And guess what? There was a pile of junk back there, old boxes, rusty cans, broken chairs, all stacked up like a messy mountain. It was hidden from the front, but from Jake's yard, he could see it clear as day. That junk broke every HOA rule in the book. Karen's own rules. Jake's eyes got wide for a second. Then he smiled, a slow, sneaky smile. He didn't run over and yell, "Gotcha." He didn't tell the neighbors or call Karen out. Nope, he just watched and waited. He leaned against his shed, arms crossed, looking at that junk pile. Well, 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 he said to himself, so quiet no one could hear. Karen thought she was the boss, but Jake was starting to see the cracks in her perfect little world. Karen didn't know Jake was watching. She kept acting like she had the upper hand. She'd walk by his house every day, pointing at the red door and shaking her head. "Your trouble, new guy," she'd say to anyone who'd listen. She told Linda, "He's ruining our neighborhood." She told Mr. Thompson, "That door's a disgrace." She even stopped little Timmy on his bike and said, "Tell your mom that shed's no good." Timmy just pedaled away fast, not wanting to get stuck in her rant. But every time Karen pointed a finger at Jake, he was one step ahead. He didn't fight back with words or yells. He didn't need to. He was gathering proof quietly, slowly, like collecting puzzle pieces. That leaning fence, he remembered it. That patchy grass, he noted it in his head. That junk pile, oh, that was the best part. He didn't have a clipboard like Karen, but he didn't need one. His eyes and his brain were enough. The tension was building, like when you blow air into a balloon and it gets tighter and tighter. Karen kept pushing. She left more notes, 5 in 1 week. "Last warning," one said. She got 3 more neighbors to sign her petition. She even stuck a big sign in her yard that said, "Keep OAKWOODHILLS neat," with an arrow pointing right at Jake's house. She thought she was so smart, so in charge. She thought Jake was just some guy she could boss around. But Jake stayed cool. He'd wake up every morning, grab his coffee, and sit on his porch. He'd wave at the neighbors, mow his lawn, and keep that red door shining like a bright ruby. When Karen walked by, he'd nod and say, "Nice day, huh?" She'd huff and puff, but he never got mad. He didn't need to. He had a plan, not a loud plan, not a mean plan, but a smart one. He was waiting for the right moment, and it was getting closer every day. The neighbors started to feel it too. Mrs. Lopez saw Karen's sign and rolled her eyes. "She's at it again," she said to her cat. Little Timmy told his mom, "Karen's being bossy," and his mom just laughed. Even old Mr. Thompson, who'd signed the petition, started to wonder. "Maybe that red door's not so bad," he mumbled, watering his roses. Everyone could sense something was up. The air felt heavy, like before a big storm. Jake didn't tell anyone what he knew, not yet. He didn't brag about Karen's messy yard or her broken rules. He just kept living his life, calm and steady. But every time Karen yelled, every time she left a note, he got a little more ready. That junk pile behind her garage, it was like a secret weapon. The leaning fence and patchy grass, extra ammo. Karen thought she was winning, but Jake was building something bigger than a shed. He was building a surprise. Then came the day Karen went too far. It was a warm afternoon in Oakwood Hills, and the sun was shining bright. Karen had been mad for weeks about Jake's red shed door, leaving notes and yelling at anyone who'd listen. But this time she did something wild. She stood right in her front yard, her phone pressed to her ear, and dialed 911. Yes, the real police. She was screaming into the phone so loud that the whole street could hear her. "There's an illegal structure on Miller's property," she shouted. "It's that awful shed with the red door. I demand an officer right now." Now Jake was sitting on his porch, sipping a glass of lemonade. He heard every word. Karen's voice was like a siren bouncing off the houses. He leaned back in his chair, shook his head, and let out a little laugh. He wasn't scared or mad. He just watched her, calm as ever, like he knew something she didn't. And guess what? He did. While Karen was yelling into her phone, something crazy happened. A police car rolled up slow and quiet right into her driveway. Not Jake's driveway, hers. The lights on top weren't flashing, but the car was real, and it stopped right in front of Karen's perfect little house. She didn't even notice at first. She was too busy screeching about Jake's shed. But then the car door opened and an officer stepped out. He was tall, with a blue uniform and a clipboard in his hand, just like Karen, but bigger. Karen finally saw him. She froze mid-sentence, her phone still up to her ear. The officer walked over, his boots clicking on the pavement. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and serious, "we've had complaints about your property." Karen's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground. "What, me?" she squeaked, her eyes wide like saucers. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She pointed at herself, then at Jake, then back at herself. "No, no, no, you've got it wrong. It's him, his shed, that red door." Jake stayed on his porch, watching it all. He took another sip of lemonade, a tiny smile on his face. The officer didn't even glance at Jake's shed. He flipped a page on his clipboard and kept talking.